up loving to perform more than actually loving to dance. And since we all have all this in common, I think the reason I worked for Fosse so much is because I approached it almost as an actor. And Liza Minnelli said this better than I could, but after you learn the step, I would watch his face, and that would tell me why he's doing the step. And he's very good at communicating that in his images and all that. And I think that's one of the reasons I worked for him. I wasn't very technical. I just was able to understand what he meant by a step that he was doing. And he was so generous to his dancers. I worked first in the National Company of Damn Yankees, and then I stayed out in California, and he was casting Pajama Game movie, so I auditioned and I got that, and then he asked me if I would come back to do New Girl in Town. And he said, you have to audition, but you'll get it. And I was thrilled because I had a crush on Gwen like crazy from all those Ed Sullivan shows. And I knew who Bob Fosse was as a kid from watching Niles and Fosse and Niles, and all. I was addicted to Ed Sullivan, and I think our generation has lost something because we don't have any kind of variety television where you can learn about opera or a symphony or ballet or you know, every week there was a new Broadway show on Ed Sullivan. And also Fosse, this was before casting directors, and if you got a Fosse show, he would call you and say, hi, I want you to be in my next show. So we didn't miss. I mean, it wasn't like Cameron McIntosh or somebody, hey, you want to do a show, we'll pay a minimum and it's a track, and if you don't want to do it, we'll call somebody else. It was like, oh my God, Bob Fosse is calling me and I'm auditioning, and he got it, and you didn't want to miss. And he did create on you. You know, he was there. He switched it around. And we did have to always audition for everything.
Everything.
But I got to be one of those trios.
That's right.
That was.
And I replaced him when he left. I finally got to do it with Eddie Phillips.
And I must say, he could charm the pants out of you to get what he wanted, you know. So.
Yes. Jean, your background, you had a lot of ballet background. Did you, were you with companies before you?
I came to New York to go on Broadway. But I didn't know anything. I came from University of Denver, had to take a dance course. It was Martha Wilcox, who was a student of Hanya Holm. Kiss Me Kate had just opened. She was always talking of Hanya Holm. So I realized if I stayed in Denver, I was going to teach drama in a high school, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I came to New York. I knew Hanya Holm, and somehow I knew the name Martha Graham. And Hanya was up here on 8th Avenue at Michael's in a dive and didn't teach classes after work. And Martha did, and she taught all her classes, not all the time, but she taught every level at some time. So I went to Martha Graham's, and then I sneaked over to Weidman, then I ended up at Ballet Arts. We didn't talk about it at Graham's, you know. You know, they use all these terms, modern dancers, but they've never gotten around plie. There's no substitute. Knee bend doesn't do it. So I auditioned, and I wasn't particular, and one day I auditioned for Slavenska Franklin, got into the ballet, spent 2 years there. That ended. I went to another audition for Balanchine, didn't expect it, but I spent 2 years in New York City. Then I got out. See, I become a Balanchine dancer, then I became a Robbins dancer. Then I was a Rod Alexander dancer. And my first connection with Fosse was Hail the Conquering Hero. Now, I'd looked through what was coming up that year, and that was the show I wanted to do. So I came back from the coast on the red eye one night, opened my mailbox, and there was that nice little equity card, audition for Hail the Conquering Hero, 10 o'clock at a theater. So I took a shower and changed my clothes and went to the audition. And now at this point in my life, when I went to an audition, now it didn't always happen, but when I went to an audition, I expected a job. You know, if it was Agnes DeMille, it didn't work. I didn't even have to change my clothes, just phone it in, she'd dismiss me. But I auditioned and he called me back to the final. And I was very unhappy with my audition. I felt I hadn't done very well. And I did something I'd never done before and have never done since. I went down to Variety Arts and rented a studio, and I practiced every step he'd given. I guess it's an oxymoron, I practiced the improvisation. And I went back to the final, and everything was fine, till about halfway through, the antenna went up, and I thought, I ain't getting this job. So we got down to the end, and he didn't make his selection at the end of that rehearsal, or the audition. And that night, the phone rings, and it's Bob, and he says, Gene, I can't seem to find a place for you in this show. And I said, I got that message this afternoon. And he said, oh, well, you're taking this awfully well. So that was my first experience with Bob. I did not know him until the revival of Pal Joey at the City Center, where Ralph Beaumont did the choreography, and Bobby did his own choreography. But he was very complimentary to me. He also found out I liked baseball. And he was so proud that he had met Joe DiMaggio because he had when he researched Damn Yankee. And I think every night he said, you know, I met Joe DiMaggio. So then my next connection with him was Little Me. Now this was a problem when that came up again. This was the show I wanted to do. But by that time, I'd been kind of a Carol Haney dancer, and I kind of owed her my loyalty. And that spring, we had opened a show called Bravo Giovanni, which got middling reviews and had a nice big advance sale in October, and this was April. So they got special dispensation from the unions to close the show for, I don't know if it was 2 months or 3 months, whatever, and reopen. So as it turned out, the day that they were having the first audition for Little Me was also the day I was supposed to sign my contract for Bravo Giovanni. And I had this whole pull. I wanted to do Little Me, but I really owed Carol my loyalty. So I went down to the audition and I asked Bob if I auditioned, could he tell me today? And he said no. He didn't know what was out there, couldn't do it. So I didn't audition. That night, the phone rings, and it's Gwen. Bobby, I'd like you to do Little Me. But I had already signed my contract. So Bravo reopened and flopped. Little Me went out of town and was a success. And I guess they were looking for a swing there, so they called me, and so I went in the back door without auditioning. And from then on, I was always, they asked me. When I finished Little Me, I did another Oldsmobile. I was out on the coast. By the end of that, Phil Friedman, the production stage manager of all the Fuhrer and Martin shows, he called and said somebody was leaving, How to Succeed. Do you want the position? If you do, they'll hold it for a couple weeks. I played hard to get and said yes. And so I went in, and then I assisted in staging the road company of Little Me, and then went back into How to Succeed, and then Pleasures and Palaces, on and on and on.
Pretty full